The council chamber floated in the darkness between stars. Inside, beings from 1,000 different worlds gathered under the pale blue lights. Some had wings, others had scales. Some breathed oxygen, others needed methane. But they all came together in this place called Kepler Prime to talk about the future of the galaxy. Speaker Thelax moved through the crowd on 6 delicate legs. Her moth-like wings caught the light as she carried an old data tablet. She had found something strange in the ruins on Dust 7th. Something that made her mandibles click with excitement. Ancient writing. References to a species no one remembered. The old texts mention them, she said to the assembled leaders. They called themselves humans. They came from a planet called Earth or Terra. 10,000 years ago they shared technology with our ancestors. Then they vanished. An elderly crystalline being named Kirith hummed softly. I have heard this story. Most believe it is a myth. A legend to explain where our faster-than-light drives came from. But what if it is real? Thelax insisted. What if they are still out there? The others dismissed her concerns. The galaxy was mapped. Every star system was charted. There was no Earth, there never had been. It was just a story, but Thelax was right and she was wrong. Earth existed. It had always existed. Humanity had never gone anywhere. They simply could not leave. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space that appeared empty on every scanner and map, the Sol system thrived with life. Earth spun blue and green as it always had. The moon still circled faithfully. Mars gleamed red with the lights of 30 billion inhabitants. Europa's ice held cities beneath its frozen shell. Titan's orange clouds concealed floating platforms where another 20 billion people lived and worked. Orbital stations ringed every planet. Massive cylinders rotated to create gravity for the 50 billion, who called the void their home. Ships moved constantly between worlds carrying cargo, passengers, and dreams. But none of them could leave the system. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the military station Unity 1. She was 53 years old. With gray streaking through her black hair, she had spent her entire career preparing for something that never came. First contact, the day humanity would meet aliens. Still nothing, her second officer reported. The barrier is still there, Sarah nodded. Everyone called it the barrier, though no one understood what it was. Anything that tried to leave the Sol system simply stopped responding. Ships, probes, even radio signals. They went out and silence came back. Something surrounded their entire star system, cutting them off from the universe beyond. Humanity had discovered this 10,000 years ago when they first developed faster-than-light travel. The joy of that achievement had turned to horror when they realized they were trapped. Generations of scientists had studied the barrier. Generations of engineers had tried to break through. Nothing worked, so humanity had turned inward. They built and grew within their cage. They fought wars among themselves over resources and ideology. They made peace and broke it and made it again. They wondered endlessly if they were alone in the universe or if something had deliberately imprisoned them. Sarah had joined the first contact fleet when she was 20. That was 33 years ago. 33 years of waiting for a door that would not open. Admiral, a technician called out. We're getting some strange readings from the barrier. Sarah's heart jumped. Strange readings usually meant nothing, but she walked quickly to the scanner station anyway. Show me. The holographic display showed the invisible wall that surrounded their system. Except now, tiny fluctuations rippled across its surface like waves on water. What is that? Sarah whispered. Unknown. It started about 10 minutes ago. The fluctuations are increasing. Sarah watched the display. The waves grew stronger. Her hands gripped the edge of the console. Something was happening. After 10,000 years, something was finally happening. Alert all stations, she ordered. Get me the Secretary General. Get me everyone. The waves grew into pulses. The pulses grew into surges. Energy readings spiked across every instrument. Alarms began to sound as sensors overloaded trying to measure what was occurring. And then, like a soap bubble popping, the barrier vanished. Silence fell across Unity 1. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the sensors came alive with data. Stars. Thousands of stars that had been invisible suddenly appeared. Radio signals. Electromagnetic radiation. Heat signatures. Energy readings that could only mean one thing, civilizations. Oh my God, someone whispered. Sarah's hands trembled. Start recording everything. Begin analysis of all signals. Prepare the first contact protocols. She paused, hardly believing the words coming from her mouth. We are not alone. Across human space, the news spread like wildfire. Earth was no longer isolated. The barrier was gone. The universe was full of life. Full of people. Full of possibilities. Dr. James Okonkwo was in his office at the University of Lagos when he heard. He was 71 years old and had spent 50 years of his life learning to speak to aliens. He had studied every language on Earth. He had developed frameworks for communicating with minds that might think nothing like humans. He had written 30 books on xenolinguistics, all theoretical because there were no aliens to talk to. He sat down heavily in his chair and started to cry. Happy tears, grateful tears. His life's work was not wasted. There would be someone to talk to after all. But while humanity celebrated, on the other side of the barrier's collapse, the Galactic Council was in chaos. An entire star system just appeared, Council Military Commander Zephyrin reported. His scaled face showed confusion and concern. No system existed in that location yesterday. Today, sensors show 9 planets and energy signatures indicating massive population centers. How is that possible? Someone demanded. Unknown. We are analyzing the data now. Thelax felt her wings flutter. The coordinates. Check the coordinates against the ancient texts. They did. The location matched perfectly. The system that had appeared was exactly where the old legend said Earth should be. Send the harmonious accord, the council decided. We will make contact carefully. We do not know who or what we will find. 3 months of preparation followed. Both sides moved cautiously. Humanity built the Olive Branch, a ship designed for peace covered in landing platforms and meeting halls. The council prepared the Harmonious Accord, their most beautiful diplomatic vessel, a work of art that happened to fly. Admiral Sarah Chen was chosen to lead humanity's delegation. Dr. Okonkwo would handle communications. 300 diplomats, scientists, and soldiers would accompany them. On the day of departure, Sarah stood before the gathered crew. We are about to meet our neighbors, she said. We will show them the best of what humanity can be. We will offer friendship. We will seek understanding. This is the most important journey our species has ever taken. The 2 ships launched toward each other, crossing the vast distance at faster-than-light speeds. They agreed to meet halfway in neutral space between their territories. When the Olive Branch dropped out of FTL, Sarah saw the Harmonious Accord for the first time. It was beautiful. Graceful curves and elegant design. Nothing like the angular, practical human ship. They are hailing us, the communications officer reported. Sarah took a deep breath. Open the channel. Let history begin. On the view screen, a crystalline face appeared. It was Kirith, chosen to lead the council's delegation. The being's features were alien and strange, but something in its eyes seemed gentle, curious, hopeful. Greetings, Kirith said, in a language Sarah did not understand. But Dr. Okonkwo was already working, and the translation computers were learning. We welcome you to the galactic community. We have much to discuss, Sarah smiled. We agree. We have waited a long time for this moment. Let us begin. Neither side knew that something else had awakened, far away in the darkness between galaxies. Ancient things stirred, things that had been sleeping, things that were hungry. The barrier had not just kept humanity in. It had kept something else out. The meeting room aboard the Harmonious Accord was designed to accommodate many different life forms. The atmosphere was carefully balanced. The temperature was neutral. Seats and perches of various designs lined the walls. It was the council's way of showing respect for diversity. Admiral Sarah Chen floated through the entrance with Dr. Okonkwo and her security chief beside her. The gravity was lighter than Earth standard. She felt awkward and heavy in her uniform, compared to the graceful aliens who seemed to glide effortlessly through the space. Ambassador Kirith approached them. The crystalline being's body caught and reflected the light in rainbow patterns. Welcome. We are pleased you accepted our invitation. Dr. Okonkwo's translation device worked perfectly now. 3 months of signal exchange had given both sides enough data to build working translators. The pleasure is ours, Sarah replied. Humanity has dreamed of this day for 10,000 years. 10,000 years? Kirith's tone suggested surprise. That is how long you have been isolated? Yes, we could not leave our system. Something prevented us. Thelax, the moth-like researcher, came forward. Her wings moved gently in the low gravity. The ancient texts mention a barrier, something the predecessors built, but we do not know why. Predecessors? Sarah asked. The species that came before us, Kirith explained. They built many things across the galaxy. Then they vanished millions of years ago. We still do not understand what happened to them. The talks continued for hours. Humanity learned they were joining a community of thousands of species. The Galactic Council had existed for 8,000 years, maintaining peace and cooperation across hundreds of thousands of worlds. Wars were rare. Conflicts were resolved through dialogue. The galaxy, they said, had learned to live together. Sarah found it almost too good to be true. You have no militaries? We have defense forces, Zephyrin replied. The scaled commander had joined the meeting. But they are small. We have not fought a major war in over 2,000 years. The galaxy is peaceful. Dr. Okonkwo exchanged glances with Sarah. Humanity's history was different, very different. But they said nothing. Not yet. The cultural exchange began in earnest. Council scientists visited human ships. Human diplomats toured council stations. Everyone was fascinated by everyone else. But differences began to emerge. Small ones at first, then larger ones that could not be ignored. A council inspection team arrived at Unity 1 to observe human technology. They walked through the military station with growing unease. Everything had armor plating. Every corridor had weapons lockers. Every civilian habitat they scanned showed defensive systems. Why are your cities armed? The lead inspector asked. You had no external threats. Colonel Marcus Webb, the station commander, seemed confused by the question. We had internal threats. Different nations competed for resources. Different groups had conflicting ideologies. We fought each other. But your species survived the wars. You learned peace. We learned temporary peace, Marcus corrected. We still have disputes. We simply choose to resolve most of them without violence now. But we stay prepared in case that changes. The inspectors found the human mindset disturbing. Every defensive system was efficient and deadly. Human weapons were not designed to disable or deter. They were designed to destroy completely. The Council's weapons were elegant and measured. Human weapons were brutal and overwhelming. They are too militarized, one inspector reported back to the Council. Every aspect of their society is built around conflict. On Earth, human observers noticed different problems. Council technology was incredible, but it was optimized for efficiency and beauty rather than durability. Their ships were fast but lightly armored. Their defensive systems were sophisticated but had low output. Everything was designed for a peaceful galaxy. They are not prepared for real war, General Liu reported to Earth Security Council. If someone attacked them with serious intent, they would struggle to respond. Maybe no one does attack them, someone suggested. Maybe they are right and the galaxy is peaceful. Maybe, Liu agreed. But he did not sound convinced. Corporal Maria Santos was 24 years old and had never expected to leave Earth's orbital defense forces. Now she found herself assigned as part of a cultural exchange program, living aboard a council station with soldiers from a dozen species. Her roommate was a being called Vixen, who resembled a blue-furred fox with 6 legs. Vixen was part of the council defense forces, though she had never seen combat. None of them had. Do you really practice for war every day? Vixen asked, watching Maria clean her rifle. Yes. Training keeps us ready. But ready for what? There is no war. Maria paused. How could she explain? My grandmother told me stories about the water wars. 2 billion people died fighting over resources. My grandfather fought in the African conflicts. 30 million dead. We remember these things. We train so they do not happen again, but we train knowing they could. Vixen's ears flattened. Your species has hurt itself so much. I am sorry. Do not be sorry. We survived. We learned. But we did not forget. The friendship between them grew despite the differences. They learned from each other. Maria taught Vixen human combat techniques. Vixen taught Maria council philosophy. They represented in small what the larger relationship was becoming. Mutual respect built on very different foundations. Dr. Okonkwo spent his days working on translation and cultural frameworks. The language barriers were falling quickly, but conceptual barriers remained. Some ideas simply did not translate well between species that had evolved in such different circumstances that the council species struggled to understand human concepts like mutually assured destruction or total war. These ideas had no equivalence in their recent history. Humans struggled to understand council concepts like voluntary resource sharing and conflict resolution through artistic competition. These worked in council space but seemed impossibly naive to human minds. "We are too different," Thelax said one evening, dining with Dr. Okonkwo aboard the Olive Branch. "Perhaps the barrier existed to keep our civilizations separate. Or perhaps it existed to let us develop separately," Okonkwo replied. "So we could offer different perspectives, different strengths." "What strength does violence bring?" Okonkwo considered carefully. "Violence itself brings nothing good. But the knowledge of violence, the preparation for it, the ability to meet it when necessary, these things can protect what is precious. Your people have built something beautiful, peace across thousands of worlds. But what happens if something threatens that peace? We negotiate. We find common ground. And if your enemy has no interest in common ground, if they only want destruction?" Thelax's antennae twitched uncomfortably. "Such beings do not exist anymore. Not in our galaxy." But even as she said it, something was moving through the darkness. Something that cared nothing for negotiation or common ground. The first warnings came from deep space monitoring stations. Strange readings from empty regions of space. Energy signatures that appeared and disappeared. Movement where nothing should be moving. The Council's scientists analyzed the data for weeks before calling an emergency session. Kirith stood before the assembled leaders and delivered news that would change everything. "We have detected an unknown fleet approaching the outer colonies. They are not responding to hails. Their trajectory suggests they are headed toward Bright Sky Colony. Perhaps they are explorers," someone suggested. "Like the humans were isolated, maybe these beings were as well." "Send diplomatic ships," the Council decided. "Make contact peacefully." But Thelax remembered something from the old texts, something she had not mentioned before. She pulled up the ancient files and searched frantically through the predecessor warnings. There, buried in damaged data, she found it. References to the harvest, a species that consumed others. Something the predecessors had fought. Something they had sealed away in dark space. And references to Terra's children, warriors born, sealed not as punishment, but as protection. Her wings began to tremble. "We need to call the humans," she said. "Right now." But the message would take time to reach Earth, and Bright Sky Colony did not have time. The diplomatic ships reached the unknown fleet. They broadcast greetings in 1,000 languages. They showed peaceful intent. They opened their communications wide. The unknown fleet fired without hesitation. The diplomatic ships died in seconds. No survivors, no warning, no mercy. Then the fleet, which Council sensors now showed was more like a swarm, fell upon Bright Sky Colony like locusts. 4 billion people screamed for help. The Council mobilized their defense forces as fast as they could, but they were scattered across the galaxy, designed for patrols and shows of presence, not rapid response to crisis. Bright Sky fell in 72 hours. When Council ships finally arrived, they found nothing alive. The cities were empty. The orbital stations were dark. 4 billion people simply gone, consumed. The galaxy realized something terrible. After thousands of years of peace, war had returned, and they had forgotten how to fight it. The emergency broadcast reached every corner of Council space. 4 billion dead, an entire colony consumed. The peaceful galaxy had witnessed its first mass casualty event in 2,000 years. Aboard the Olive Branch, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the reports with growing horror. The footage showed devastated cities, empty streets, ships torn apart. Whatever attacked Bright Sky had not just killed. It had erased every trace of life. What could do this? Dr. Okonkwo asked, his voice shaking. "Something that sees us as food," Sarah replied grimly. The Council named it the Vexarun Swarm, after ancient words meaning the end that consumes. But names did not matter. What mattered was stopping it. Council ships mobilized from hundreds of systems. They gathered into the largest fleet assembled in millennia. Over 3,000 vessels, each beautiful and advanced. The crews were brave but inexperienced. None had fought a real war. None had faced an enemy that wanted only destruction. Fleet Master Zephyr commanded the armada from his flagship, the Morning Light. It was a vessel designed for exploration and diplomacy, hastily fitted with upgraded weapons. Most council ships were the same. They had tools for defense, but their entire philosophy was built around avoiding conflict. "We will meet them at the Kepler Prime Station," Zephyr announced. "We will show them that the Council protects its own." Earth watched the preparations with increasing concern. Sarah sent message after message offering assistance. Human military advisors were ready. Human ships could be dispatched. Humanity's long, painful experience with war could be shared. Every offer was politely declined. "We appreciate your concern," Kirith told Sarah during a diplomatic call, "but this is a council matter. Your species has only just joined the galactic community. You lack experience with our coordination protocols. It would take too long to integrate your forces." What Kirith did not say, but Sarah heard anyway, was that the Council did not want humanity's kind of war. They would handle this with their methods: measured, civilized, controlled. Sarah closed the communication channel and turned to her command staff. "They are going to get slaughtered. They outnumbered the enemy, 3-1 according to their scouts." Her tactical officer pointed out. "Numbers do not matter if you do not know how to use them." On Earth, the debate raged. Should humanity intervene without permission? Should they respect Council wishes and stay back? The Security Council was divided. "We owe them nothing yet," one member argued. "Let them handle their own problems." "We owe them decency," another countered. 4 billion dead. How can we stand by? General Liu made the strongest case. This swarm attacked without warning and without mercy. If it defeats the Council, it will come for us eventually. We should fight it now while we have allies. But the decision was made to wait. Humanity would respect Council wishes. For now. The swarm reached Kepler Prime Station 3 weeks after Bright Sky fell. Council scouts had tracked its movement. It was heading directly for the station, where 15 billion beings lived and worked. The Council fleet positioned itself between the station and the approaching threat. Fleetmaster Zephyr broadcast to his fleet, "We stand for peace. We stand for life. We will show this enemy that the Council does not abandon its people." The swarm arrived in a cloud of biomechanical nightmares, ships that looked grown rather than built. Hulls of metal and flesh fused together. Sensors showed thousands of individual vessels all moving in perfect coordination. Zephyr opened all frequencies. "Unknown vessels, this is Fleetmaster Zephyr of the Galactic Council. You have committed acts of violence against peaceful beings. We ask that you cease hostilities and enter negotiations." The swarm responded with weapons fire. The battle began badly for the Council. Their ships were fast and their shields were strong, but their weapons were designed for precision, not power. They fired beams meant to disable enemy systems. They launched projectiles designed to force surrender. The swarm had no systems to disable. No crew to convince. No concept of surrender. Swarm vessels tore through Council shields with biological weapons that adapted to energy frequencies. They closed a boarding range and released creatures that ate through hull plating. They replicated in real time, building new ships from the wreckage of destroyed Council vessels. Zephyr watched his fleet shrink. Beautiful ships crewed by brave people died one after another. His careful tactics meant nothing against an enemy that felt no fear and accepted no terms. "Fall back to defensive formation around the station," he ordered. "Protect the civilians." But the swarm split its forces. Half continued the assault on the fleet. Half bypassed the battle entirely and went straight for Kepler Prime. On the station, panic erupted. 15 billion beings tried to evacuate. The Council's evacuation protocols were thorough but slow. They prioritized the young and injured. They organized orderly queues. They followed procedure even as death approached. Thelax was on Kepler Prime helping coordinate the evacuation of her research facility. Her students and colleagues moved calmly despite their terror. This was the Council way. Order even in chaos, but there were too many people and too little time. The swarm reached the station's outer ring. It began to tear through the hull. Atmospheric shields failed. Sections decompressed. Thousands died in seconds. The creatures poured inside, hunting anything that moved. Zephyr threw everything he had at the swarm forces attacking the station. His ships made suicide runs, buying seconds for more evacuations. The morning light itself drove into the heart of the swarm formation, weapons firing continuously. "Get the people out," Zephyr ordered. "That is all that matters now." The Council fleet fought with desperate courage. But courage without experience, without the brutal knowledge of how to kill efficiently, was not enough. After 6 hours, Zephyrin gave the hardest order of his life. All ships, full retreat. Save who you can and withdraw. The evacuation ships jumped to faster than light speed, carrying 4 billion survivors. 11 billion were left behind. The Council fleet limped away with 40% casualties. Over 1,000 beautiful ships destroyed. Kepler Prime fell. The swarm consumed it completely. Across Council space, the news hit like a physical blow. 11 billion dead. The fleet shattered. The enemy was unstoppable. For the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Council knew fear. Emergency sessions were called. Every species sent representatives. The debate was frantic and desperate. We need to evacuate the border. Colonies, someone suggested. We need to call for a general. Retreat, another said. We need to find a way to negotiate, a third insisted. Thelax stood and spoke quietly. Her voice cut through the panic. We need to ask the humans for help. Silence fell. They are too few, someone protested. They have only a few hundred ships. But they know war. Thelax replied. They have fought wars that killed billions. They built their entire civilization around surviving conflict. We built ours around avoiding it. We were wrong. Kirith spoke up, the crystalline being's voice heavy with grief. The humans offered assistance. We refused. How can we ask them now? Because people are dying, Thelax said simply. Pride is a luxury we no longer have. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The Council had run out of options. Back on the Olive Branch, Admiral Sarah Chen received the message she had been dreading and expecting. It was Fleet Master Zephyrin himself, his scaled face showing exhaustion and something humans knew well, the look of a commander who had lost too many people. Admiral Chen, he said quietly, the Galactic Council requests the assistance of humanity. We need your help, please. Sarah felt no satisfaction in being right, only sadness for what those words cost him. Fleet Master, humanity will answer. Tell us where you need us. There is a colony called New Haven, 22 billion people. The swarm will reach it in 36 hours. Our fleet cannot arrive in time. Sarah checked her star charts. New Haven was far from human space, but her ships could make it, barely. We will be there. Thank you. Zephyrin paused. I do not know what your ships can do that ours cannot. But I pray it is enough. Sarah closed the channel and turned to her crew. All hands, battle stations. Send the recall signal to Earth. Tell them to mobilize the First Fleet. Tell them we are going to war. Across human space, warships that had been waiting for 10,000 years received their orders. Crews that had trained endlessly for a fight that never came suddenly had a purpose. Weapons that had been maintained in careful readiness powered up. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had become during their long isolation. They were about to learn what 10,000 years of preparing for the worst could create. The hammer was about to fall. New Haven was a paradise world. Rolling green hills covered 3 continents. Blue oceans sparkled under a yellow sun. The colony had existed for 600 years and was home to 22 billion beings from 40 different species. It was a symbol of what the Council had built, different people living together in peace. Now that peace was about to end. The evacuation had begun the moment the swarm's trajectory was confirmed. But moving 22 billion people was impossible in 36 hours. Maybe a billion could escape. The rest would die unless someone stopped the swarm. The Council fleet was too far away. Every ship that could move was racing toward New Haven, but they would arrive hours too late. The planet's defense forces were brave but small. They had weapons designed for pirates and smugglers, not for a swarm that had destroyed an entire station. On New Haven, a mother held her 3 children close. They were not human, but the love in her eyes was universal. It will be okay, she lied. The Council will save us. In orbit, the defense commander looked at his 16 ships and knew they would not be enough. But they would fight anyway. They would buy time for the evacuation ships. Minutes, maybe hours if they were lucky. The swarm approached like a dark cloud blotting out the stars. Then something impossible happened. Space tore open. Faster than light ruptures appeared one after another. Ships emerged, but they were not Council vessels. These ships were angular and brutal. No elegant curves. No artistic design. They looked like weapons that happened to fly. 200 human warships dropped into New Haven space. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable. Around her, the first contact fleet had transformed. Gone were the diplomatic configurations and greeting platforms. The ships had reconfigured to war mode. Weapons ports opened. Armor plates locked. Every system was optimized for one purpose: destruction. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. New Haven will not fall today. Make ready. The Council Defense Commander stared at his screens in shock. Human vessels, this is Defense Commander Lorian. We were not expecting you. Commander, withdraw your ships to the planet. Protect the evacuation sites. We will handle the swarm. But there are thousands of them and only 200 of you. Sarah's smile was not kind. It was the smile of a predator. Then the odds are almost even. Indomitable out, the human fleet moved into formation. Not the careful, organized formations the Council used. Human ships spread out in loose clusters, each one capable of independent action but coordinating through AI systems the Council had banned millennia ago. The swarm did not slow down. It had learned nothing meant negotiation. Nothing meant mercy. It only knew consumption. The two forces met in the space between New Haven and its moon. The swarm attacked with the same tactics that had destroyed the Council fleet. Biomechanical ships closed rapidly. Adaptive weapons fired. Boarding creatures launched. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. Humanity had spent 10,000 years developing weapons for every nightmare they could imagine. Kinetic cannons fired projectiles at 3% light speed. The rounds punched through swarm vessels like paper. Nuclear-pumped plasma lances created temperatures matching the sun's core. Gravity field generators crushed enemy ships into spheres of compressed matter. The swarm adapted its shields to energy weapons. Humans switched to kinetic. The swarm hardened its armor. Humans fired armor-piercing explosives. The swarm sent boarding parties. Humans decompressed entire sections of their ships, venting the creatures into space, then repressurized and continued fighting. Every human adaptation was faster than the swarm's evolution. Every human tactic was brutal in its efficiency. Corporal Maria Santos was aboard the destroyer Relentless when it took a boarding hit. Swarm creatures tore through the outer hull. The ship's AI immediately locked down the affected sections and vented atmosphere. Seal up, Maria ordered her fire team. We are going in. Her squad entered the compromised section in full combat armor. The creatures they found were nightmares made real. Part insect, part machine, all hunger. They moved with frightening speed. Maria's squad moved faster. Rail rifles cracked. Explosive rounds detonated. Plasma cutters burned. The fight was close and vicious. One creature got past Maria's defense and tore through her armor plating. She felt claws rake across her ribs even as she jammed her sidearm under its carapace and fired until it stopped moving. Section clear, she reported, breathing hard. Hull breach sealed. Requesting damage control. Negative, the ship's captain replied. We need you on shuttle. Ground assault. New Haven surface. Maria looked at her bleeding side. Understood. Santos out. The swarm had landed troops on New Haven's surface. They were attacking evacuation sites. The human response was to send their own ground forces down. This was something the Council never did. They would not risk civilian casualties with orbital strikes near populated areas. They would evacuate first, then fight. Humans calculated acceptable risk differently. Maria's shuttle dropped through the atmosphere with 11 others. They landed near an evacuation center, where 3 million civilians were boarding transport ships. Swarm creatures were already attacking the perimeter. Light them up, the strike commander ordered. Orbital platforms began firing, not the precise targeted strikes the Council used. Human orbital strikes were area denial weapons. They turned square kilometers into craters. But the calculations were perfect. Every strike landed exactly where it needed to be. Close enough to annihilate the swarm forces, far enough to keep the civilians safe. The margin for error was meters. Humans accepted that margin. Maria's squad hit the ground and moved toward the evacuation center. Swarm creatures were everywhere. The battle became a chaotic swirl of violence. Council defenders fought bravely but carefully, trying not to hit civilians. Human soldiers fought with controlled aggression, trusting their training and enhanced targeting systems. A young Council defender, Vixen, was pinned down by 3 creatures. She had exhausted her weapons charge trying to disable them. They were about to overwhelm her when Maria appeared, rifle firing. "Stay down!" Maria shouted. She killed 2 creatures with precise headshots, then used her last grenade on the third. "You okay?" Vixen stared at her friend. You are injured. I will live, come on. We need to hold this position. Together they fought. Human aggression paired with council precision. They held the line while behind them. 3 million civilians boarded the evacuation ships. In orbit, the battle continued. Human ships took heavy casualties. The swarm was learning, adapting, evolving its tactics. But humans adapted faster. They had centuries of experience fighting enemies who learned and changed. They had developed doctrine for adaptive threats. The Indomitable lost its main cannon. Sarah ordered a ramming course. All power to forward shields. We are going through them. Her ship plowed through the swarm formation like a battering ram, firing every weapon it had at point-blank range. The shields failed. The armor buckled. But the Indomitable emerged on the other side, trailing atmosphere and debris but still fighting. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 9. The damage control officer reported. Casualties are heavy. Seal what you can. Keep us in the fight, Sarah ordered. Around her bridge crew worked with calm efficiency. They had trained for this. They were ready for this. The battle lasted 6 hours. Human ships fought with a ferocity that shocked the council observers. When weapons ran dry, they used their ships as weapons. When systems failed, they improvised. When death came, they met it while still fighting. 30% of the human fleet was destroyed. 40 ships gone. 12,000 dead, but the swarm was broken. For the first time since appearing in council space, it was forced to retreat. The creatures fled into dark space, leaving behind the wreckage of thousands of their vessels. New Haven was saved. On the surface, Maria sat against a wall while a medic worked on her wounds. The cut was deep but not fatal. She would have a scar to match the ones her grandmother earned in the water wars. Vixen sat beside her, fur matted with dust and blood. I do not understand, the council soldier said quietly. How can you fight like that? So violent, so willing to die. Maria was quiet for a moment. Because the alternative is watching others die. Because we know what happens when good people do nothing. Because we are human and we remember every lesson we learned the hard way. It is terrifying, Vixen said. Yes, it is. Maria looked at her friend. But it kept you alive. It kept them alive. She gestured to the millions of civilians now safely aboard evacuation ships. That is what matters. In orbit, Admiral Sarah Chen surveyed the damage to her fleet. 40 ships lost, 12,000 dead. The cost was terrible. But she had been in the military long enough to know that sometimes the cost of not fighting was worse. A communication came through. It was Fleetmaster Zephyr. His fleet had arrived just in time to see the battle's end. Admiral Chen, he said quietly, I witnessed what occurred here. I do not have words. You do not need words, Fleetmaster. You asked for help. We gave it. You saved 22 billion lives. You lost 12,000 of your own doing it. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. 12,000 names. 12,000 families who would grieve. Yeah, why? Zephyr asked. Why pay such a price for people you barely know? Sarah opened her eyes. Because someone had to. Because we could. The war room on Earth was quiet despite the dozens of people present. Holograms showed star charts with red markers indicating swarm sightings. Intelligence reports scrolled across screens. Representatives from both human and council military stood together, planning. General Liu pointed to a dead world deep in unexplored space. We have tracked the swarm's movements. They always return to this location. We believe this is their origin point, the place they were sealed away. Thelak studied the data carefully. Her research into predecessor sites had revealed more information. The old texts call it the cradle. The predecessors fought the swarm millions of years ago. They could not destroy it, so they imprisoned it. The barrier around your system was part of the same network of seals. And when the barrier fell, the swarm was released, Dr. Okonkwo concluded. Yes, the predecessors failed to eliminate the threat. They only delayed it. Fleetmaster Zephyr looked at the tactical display. If we destroy the cradle, we eliminate the swarm's ability to replicate and coordinate. Cut off the head. Easier said than done, General Liu replied. The cradle will be heavily defended. The swarm has been rebuilding since New Haven. Our intelligence suggests they have tens of thousands of vessels now. Admiral Sarah Chen studied the numbers. Even combined human and council forces were outnumbered. But she had learned something about the council in recent months. They were brilliant strategists when they allowed themselves to think beyond their peaceful conditioning. They had technology humanity could only dream of. Together they were more than the sum of their parts. "We can do this," Sarah said, "but we need everything. Every ship, every soldier, one final battle." The plan took shape over weeks. The Council would provide the numbers and technology. Humanity would provide tactical doctrine and weapons designed for overwhelming force. Together they would assault the cradle. 2,000 Council ships prepared for war. They were retrofitted with human weapon systems. Council engineers and human technicians worked side by side, combining technologies in ways neither had considered before. 600 human warships joined the Armada. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Every ship was crewed and ready. Every weapon was loaded. The first contact fleet had become an invasion force. Training exercises brought the two militaries together. Council crews learned human tactics. Human crews learned Council coordination protocols. It was not always smooth. Cultural differences created friction. Different philosophies clashed. But slowly, understanding grew. Corporal Maria Santos found herself training Council soldiers in ground combat. She stood before a class of 50 beings from a dozen species and tried to explain concepts that made many of them uncomfortable. "Violence is not the goal," she said. "Survival is the goal. Victory is the goal. But to achieve those goals, you must be willing to do things that feel wrong. You must be willing to hurt others to protect what matters." A young Council soldier raised a tentacle. "How do you live with that? How do you do terrible things and remain good?" Maria thought of her grandmother. Thought of the stories of war and peace. You remember why you fight. You remember who you are protecting. And you never forget that the enemy forced this choice on you. You did not want this. But when it comes, you do not hesitate. Vixen, who had become Maria's constant companion, spoke up. "She is right. At New Haven I hesitated. I tried to find a peaceful solution even as the creatures were killing civilians. Maria did not hesitate. She did what was necessary. That is why we lived." The class was quiet, absorbing this difficult lesson. On Earth, Dr. Okonkwo worked on something equally important. He was writing the historical record of these events. Someone needed to document what was happening. The galaxy needed to remember. He wrote about the Council's long peace and how it had made them vulnerable. He wrote about humanity's violent past and how it had prepared them for this moment. He wrote about the cost of war and the necessity of it when evil left no choice. "Future generations need to understand," he told Thelax, who was helping him research. "They need to know that peace is precious, but that sometimes it must be defended with force." The Council forgot this, Thelax said sadly. "We believed violence itself was the enemy. We learned too late that violence is a tool. It can be used for evil or for protection. The wielder determines its morality, not the tool itself." The day came. The Armada assembled at a staging point 3 light-years from the cradle. 2,600 ships from 100 different worlds, millions of soldiers, all preparing to face the nightmare that had plagued the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, now repaired and upgraded with Council shields. Beside her, Fleetmaster Zephyr commanded from his new flagship, the Second Dawn, fitted with human weapons. "All ships report ready," the communications officer announced. Sarah looked at Zephyr. In the months since New Haven, they had become more than allies. They had become friends. "Ready to end this?" "Ready," he confirmed. The Armada jumped to faster than light speed. When they emerged at the cradle, they found what they expected. The dead world was surrounded by swarm vessels. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. The sensors could barely count them all. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We knew this would not be easy, but we fight for every world the swarm has destroyed. For Bright Sky, for Kepler Prime, for all the billions who died. Today we end the harvest. All ships engage." The battle began. The swarm met them with everything it had. Wave after wave of biomechanical horrors launched from the cradle's surface. The space around the planet became a storm of weapons fire and explosions. The combined fleet fought with coordinated precision. Council ships used their advanced sensors to identify priority targets. Human ships eliminated those targets with brutal efficiency. When swarm vessels tried to adapt, the fleet adapted faster, but the cost was terrible. Ships died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The swarm was defending its home with desperate fury. Maria Santos was aboard the assault carrier with 10,000 other soldiers. Their mission was to reach the cradle surface and destroy the replication, centers that allowed the swarm to build new ships. 2 minutes to insertion, the pilot announced. Maria checked her squad. Humans and council soldiers mixed together. They had trained for this. They were ready. Remember your training. Watch each other's backs. We go in together, we come out together. Vixen gripped her weapon tightly. Together. The carrier punched through the swarm's orbital defenses. Hundreds of other carriers did the same. They crashed into the cradle's surface and deployed their troops. The ground war was worse than anything Maria had experienced. The swarm's homeworld was a nightmare landscape of organic technology and writhing creatures. The replication centers were massive structures that pulsed with stolen life. Maria's squad fought their way toward one such center. The combat was close and brutal. Soldiers fell. But for everyone who fell, 2 more pushed forward. They reached the replication center. Human engineers began setting charges while council soldiers held the perimeter. The explosives were special, designed by Earth scientists to create a chain reaction that would destroy the center completely. Charges set, the engineer reported. We have 5 minutes. Fall back. Maria ordered, but the swarm was not done. A massive creature larger than anything they had seen burst from the ground. It moved toward the charges, trying to stop the detonation. Maria made a decision. Get everyone out. I will hold it. Maria, no. Vixen shouted. Someone has to. Go, that is an order. Her squad retreated. Maria stood alone between the creature and the charges. She fired every weapon she had. When her rifle was empty, she used her sidearm. When that ran dry, she used grenades. When those were gone, she used her combat knife. The creature reached her. She could not stop it. But she had delayed it long enough, the charges detonated. The replication center exploded. The creature died. Maria died with it. Across the battlefield, other squads made similar sacrifices. Hundreds of soldiers gave everything to destroy the replication centers. But they succeeded. One by one, the centers fell. In orbit, the fleet continued its assault. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the casualty reports climb. Over 1,000 ships lost. Hundreds of thousands dead. But the swarm was weakening. Its ability to build new vessels was failing. All ships, final push, she ordered. Hit them with everything. The fleet surged forward. Human ships fired every weapon until their magazines were empty, then rammed swarm vessels. Council ships used their superior engines to create impossible maneuvers, striking from unexpected angles. The swarm broke. Its coordination failed as the replication centers died. Individual vessels began fleeing. The fleet hunted them down one by one. The cradle is clear, a scout reported. No remaining swarm presence detected. Sarah allowed herself one moment of relief. Then she thought of Maria Santos and the hundreds like her who would never go home. Honor the fallen. Record every name. They saved us all. The war ended. The swarm was not completely eliminated. Scattered remnants would need to be hunted for years. But its ability to threaten the galaxy was broken. The fleet returned to council space as heroes. But the celebrations were muted. Too many had died. Too much had been lost. 5 years passed, the galaxy changed. Earth integrated into the council, but on unique terms.